The capture. The Galactic Empire's grip on the outer rim tightened like a noose. Dozens of human colonies had already fallen, their resistance crushed beneath the might of Imperial legions. On the desert moon of Varkos 7, the latest target of Imperial expansion, an unassuming young woman was about to become the spark that would ignite a firestorm. Sophia Cain had lived a quiet life on Varkos 7, staying off the Empire's radar. She was no soldier, no rebel leader, just a woman who had learned how to survive in the shadows. But when an Imperial patrol raided a remote settlement, searching for insurgents, fate decided to play its hand. "Get your hands off me," she snarled, struggling against the armored grip of an Imperial shock trooper. The butt of a rifle slammed into her stomach, driving the air from her lungs. "Silence," Commander Velker sneered, stepping forward. "We've been monitoring this sector for weeks. We know rebels pass through here. You've been seen helping them." Sophia wiped blood from the corner of her mouth and glared up at him. "I don't know what you're talking about." Velker chuckled. "It doesn't matter. We don't need proof. The Empire's word is law." He motioned to his men. "Take her." Bound in energy restraints, Sophia was dragged toward a looming Imperial transport. Around her, the settlement burned. Innocent people screamed as stormtroopers forced them to their knees. She wanted to fight back, but she wasn't reckless. She knew this wasn't the time. The shuttle's doors sealed behind her, and the engines roared to life. Sophia closed her eyes, steadying her breathing. "Stay calm. Think." She wasn't a helpless prisoner. She had been trained for moments like this, not by rebels, but by her father. Most of the galaxy believed General Alexander Cain was dead. The Empire had spent years hunting him, desperate to erase the memory of the warlord who had once brought entire fleets to ruin. But Cain had vanished without a trace, and in his absence, the Empire had grown complacent. As the shuttle broke through Varkos 7's atmosphere, Velker turned to Sophia with a smug grin. "We'll be transferring you to High Command soon. You should consider yourself honored. You'll be made an example of, publicly, of course." Sophia met his gaze and smirked. "You really have no idea what you just done, do you?" Velker scoffed. "Oh, please. You're just another nobody from a backwater colony." Sophia said nothing. Let them believe that. Let them think she was just another nameless prisoner. Because somewhere in the vast reaches of space, the single biggest mistake the Empire had ever made was about to be corrected. Deep space, unknown coordinates. A lone warship drifted in the void, hidden within the remnants of a shattered asteroid field. Silent, dark, and waiting. On the bridge, a figure sat motionless in his command chair, staring at the holographic display before him. Then, a single transmission intercepted from an Imperial channel flickered to life. Subject captured. Human female. Designation, Sophia Cain. Suspected ties to rebel elements. Pending transfer to Imperial High Command. A slow exhale filled the silent bridge. A gloved hand clenched into a fist. General Alexander Cain leaned forward, his piercing gaze locked on the name that had just sealed the Empire's fate. "You have my daughter." The warship's systems roared to life. Its engines flared, its weapons primed. Somewhere in the depths of space, a legend awakened. The awakening of a monster. Deep space, aboard the Iron Fawn. The warship rumbled as it came to life, its dormant systems surging with energy. The Iron Fawn had remained hidden for years, its location known only to those loyal to the man who commanded it. Now its moment had come. General Alexander Cain stood at the center of the bridge, his expression carved from stone. He was a man who had once brought the Galactic Empire to its knees, a warrior whose name had been whispered in fear across 100 worlds. The Empire had thought him dead. They had let themselves believe they were safe. They were wrong. Cain's ice-cold eyes were locked on the intercepted Imperial transmission, the words still burning in his mind. Subject captured. Human female. Designation, Sophia Cain. His daughter. His only weakness. The crew of the Iron Fang, battle-hardened soldiers, ex-mercenaries, and outlaws who had followed Cain into exile, stood waiting. They had seen their leader fight 100 wars, but never had they seen him like this. Silent. seething, dangerous. Captain Jonas Rourke, Cain's second-in-command, stepped forward cautiously. "Orders, General?" Cain didn't look at him. His voice was low, measured, but it carried the weight of an executioner's sentence. "We take her back." Rourke nodded. "We've already tracked the transmission's origin. She's being held aboard the Imperial Dreadnought Dominion. They'll transfer her to the core world soon. If we move fast—" Cain turned, his gaze locking onto Rourke. "We don't move fast. We move ruthlessly." Rourke swallowed. He had seen Cain's tactics before. Calculated, surgical, and utterly merciless. The Empire had taken his daughter. There would be no negotiations, no warnings, just annihilation. Aboard the Dominion, Sophia sat alone in the cold, metal cell. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the walls. They hadn't even bothered to question her yet. The arrogance of the Empire was limitless. A small smirk played on her lips. They had no idea what was coming. She had grown up hearing the stories. The Butcher Galara, the Black Wolf of Orion, the man who had led human forces in brutal defiance against the Empire. But to her, he was just Dad, the man who had taught her how to fight, how to survive, and how to strike fear into the hearts of her enemies. The door to her cell hissed open. Commander Velker stepped inside, his usual smug grin plastered across his face. "Enjoying your accommodations?" Sophia tilted her head. "I'd ask for better service, but I don't think you'll be around much longer to do anything about it." Velker chuckled, still defiant. "I like that. It's almost a shame, really." He leaned against the wall. "You know, I looked into your records. No criminal history. No rebel activity. You're nobody. So tell me, why are you so damn confident?" Sophia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Because you made a mistake." Velker frowned. "And what mistake was that?" Her smile widened. "You took the wrong girl." Velker's communicator suddenly crackled to life. A panicked voice came through. "Sir, we have incoming. An unidentified warship just dropped out of hyperspace. It's the Iron Fong." Velker's face drained of color. Sophia leaned back against the cold wall of her cell, her smirk never fading. "You should have killed me when you had chance." The storm breaks. Outside, space itself seemed to tremble as the Iron Fong surged forward, its weapons locking onto the Dominion. The Dreadnought's crew scrambled, alarms blaring as the reality of the situation set in. Cain had come, and he had brought hell with him, the wrath of humanity. Aboard the Dominion, the klaxons screamed through the corridors as the Dominion lurched under sudden impact. Red warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge, and panicked voices filled the air. "Shields failing. That blast took out our port side batteries. They're jamming our long-range comms. We can't call for reinforcements." Commander Velker gripped the edge of the command console, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This wasn't a standard pirate raid. This wasn't some desperate rebel attack. This was something far worse. The Iron Fong, a ship the Empire had written off as destroyed, was here, and it was tearing through them with surgical brutality. "Return fire," Velker barked. "Launch all fighters. We outgun them, bring them down." But the truth was, numbers didn't matter. The Iron Fong wasn't just any warship. It was Cain's warship. And Cain didn't fight fair. Aboard the Iron Fong, Cain stood at the center of the bridge, watching the battlefield unfold before him. His hands were clasped behind his back, his face impassive, but his eyes burned with cold fury. The Dominion was a fortress-class dreadnought, a ship designed to crush entire fleets. But Cain had no interest in a prolonged battle. He had already won before the first shot was fired. "Phase 2, Cain ordered. "Executing," Rourke confirmed. Across the battlefield, Cain's forces moved with deadly precision. Disruptor missiles detonated along the Dominion's hull, targeting key structural weak points. A squadron of elite fighters, piloted by former Black Ops aces, sliced through Imperial defenses, cutting down enemy squadrons before they could even regroup. Inside the dreadnought, pre-planted cyber warfare protocols activated, shutting down security systems, corrupting targeting sensors, and filling the ship's network with chaos. This was not a battle. This was a butchery. Aboard the Dominion, the escape begins. Sophia heard the first explosion ripple through the ship's structure. Then another, and another. She didn't wait. Moving fast, she kicked off the wall and wrapped her bound hands around the nearest guard's throat. He barely had time to gasp before she twisted, snapping his neck. The second guard fumbled for his blaster, but Sophia spun behind him, lifted her cuffed hands over his head, and wrenched him backward. His skull hit the metal floor with a sickening crack. She exhaled sharply, then rifled through the dead man's belt for his security key. Outside her cell, chaos was already spreading. The ship rocked violently as Cain's assault continued, and Imperial personnel scrambled to respond. But deep down, every officer on that ship knew the truth. They weren't fighting an enemy. They were being hunted. Sophia moved swiftly through the corridors, avoiding patrols and heading toward the main hangar. She needed to find a way off this ship before her father destroyed it. The final blow. Back on the Iron Fong, Cain watched as the Dominion's defenses crumbled. He could see the desperation in their movements, the slow, dawning realization that they had already lost. It wasn't enough. Target their primary reactor, Cain ordered, his voice cold. Disable life support. Drive them into the dark. Rourke hesitated only for a fraction of a second before nodding. Firing now. The Iron Fong's main cannons lit up, sending a precise volley of plasma rounds into the Dominion's underbelly. Explosions rippled through the dreadnought, cutting through its spine. The ship listed violently to one side as emergency sirens wailed. Reunion in the firestorm. Sophia reached the hangar just as another explosion rocked the ship. Smoke and fire filled the bay, and escape pods launched in rapid succession. Imperial officers ran in panic, some abandoning their posts, others too terrified to move. Then she saw him, a lone figure stepping through the flames. General Alexander Cain. For the first time since her capture, Sophia felt a wave of relief. Her father had come for her. Cain strode forward, his expression unreadable, his weapon still smoking from a battle. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, the ruthless warlord was gone, replaced by a father who had just found his daughter. Dad, Sophia breathed. Cain reached out, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Are you hurt? She shook her head. I handle myself. A ghost of a smirk flickered across Cain's face. Good. Then, his eyes darkened as he looked beyond her to the burning wreckage of the Dominion. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of death itself. The reckoning. Aboard the Dominion, the final stand. Commander Velker stumbled through the smoke-filled corridors of the dying dreadnought, his uniform stained with blood and soot. The ship was falling apart around him. Fires raged, bulkheads buckled, and screaming crew members were either trying to flee or dying at their posts. This wasn't just an attack. It was an execution. Velker barely made it to the command deck, gasping for breath as he keyed his emergency communicator. This is Commander Velker of the Dominion. We are under assault by... The transmission cut off. He turned, eyes wide. Standing in the entrance of the command deck, silhouetted by the flickering emergency lights, was General Alexander Cain. The monster had arrived. Father and daughter, the battle within. Sophia followed her father through the wreckage, stepping over the bodies of fallen Imperial officers. The air reeked of burning metal and scorched flesh. She had seen war before, but nothing like this. Her father was unstoppable. He moved with terrifying precision, cutting down enemies with brutal efficiency. A soldier raised his rifle. Cain shot him before he could blink. Another tried to flee. Cain put a blade through his back. Sophia had always known what her father was capable of. She had grown up hearing the stories, the whispered tales of the butcher of Yalara, the general who had once turned an entire Imperial fleet into floating scrap. Now, she was witnessing it firsthand. Father, she said as they walked toward the command deck, her voice steady but firm. Cain didn't stop. Keep moving. We've already won, she pressed. You don't have to. Cain's gaze flicked toward her, his expression unreadable. They took you, he said simply. They thought they could get away with it. Sophia clenched her jaw. She understood his rage. She felt it too. But this wasn't just about rescue. This was retribution, and nothing would stop him. The execution of Velker. Velker reached for his weapon, but Cain was faster. In a blink, Cain crossed the room and slammed him against the command console, one hand gripping the commander's throat. "You took my daughter," Cain said, his voice cold as death itself. Velker gasped, struggling. I didn't know." Cain tightened his grip. "I don't care." He slammed Velker's head against the console. The man's nose shattered, blood splattering across the flickering monitors. Velker choked on his own blood. "Please," he coughed. "We surrender." Cain pulled out his sidearm and pressed it against Velker's forehead. Surrender is not an option. The shot echoed through the ruined bridge. Velker's body slumped to the floor. Sophia inhaled sharply, but she didn't look away. This was the price of war. And in Cain's war, mercy did not exist. The fall of the Dominion. The ship groaned, alarms blaring as the damage reached critical levels. Fires raged out of control, and the remaining Imperial officers abandoned their posts, desperate to escape. Cain activated his communicator. "Rourke, status." His second-in-command's voice crackled through. "We've disabled all escape routes except one, the hangar. Extraction team is standing by." Cain turned to Sophia. "Time to go." They moved quickly through the collapsing corridors, the walls shaking with every new explosion. As they reached the hangar, they saw it, a single Imperial shuttle, waiting for them. Cain's forces had cleared the area, leaving only the broken remains of the Empire's finest soldiers. As they boarded, Sophia glanced back at the burning dreadnought. The once mighty Dominion, a symbol of Imperial strength, was now nothing but a tomb in the void. She turned to her father. "What now?" Cain's expression was unreadable as he stared at the wreckage. "Now." His voice was quiet but laced with the promise of war. "Now, we finish what they started." Epilogue, the beginning of the end. The escaped shuttle slipped away just as the Dominion erupted in a final, massive explosion. The shockwave rippled through space, a blinding burst of fire and debris. Aboard the Iron Fong, Cain and Sophia watched in silence as the Imperial dreadnought was reduced to nothing. Sophia turned to her father. "You know they won't stop, right? The Empire will come after us." Cain's lips curled into something that might have been a smile or a warning. "I'm counting on it." Somewhere in the Galactic Empire, High Command was already receiving the news. General Alexander Cain was alive, and he had declared war.